fall back on that. When a crop goes bad, you can go to the wild resources.
They could go to the waters here and hunt.
Sure.
John White's illustrations confirm what Steve says. They clearly demonstrate local Indians spearfishing and crabbing for food. And they cook their catch on grills constructed from tree limbs. Steve's brought along a collection of seafood native to Roanoke Island, and together we're going to grill it Indian style.
That'll do. So Steve, it looks like we got ourselves a pretty fine meal. Now the natives had the knowledge, they knew where the resources existed.
Right.
If the colonists didn't, and they were cut off from their supply lines, would they have been able to reach out for this kind of knowledge?
Well, this is what they would have had to know in order to survive. This was about survival. The natives had the technology. You have to adapt.
Shrimp?
Yeah.
All right. Pretty good.
Good.
I've traveled the mid-Atlantic United States searching for any evidence the Roanoke colony of 1587 may have survived. At an Indian powwow, I learned that the native chief Manteo could have protected the colonists and moved them to his island home along the Outer Banks, Croatoan. But one historian has taken this theory in a new direction. While convinced Manteo harbored some of the English, he asserts the majority of the colonists moved into the mainland of North Carolina. Dr. James Horn of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation has asked me to join him on a motorboat ride across the Albemarle Sound, traveling due west of Roanoke Island. Drawing from historical accounts penned by early Roanoke and Jamestown settlers, Jim has constructed a new theory he believes best explains the last known whereabouts of the lost colony.
So Jim, it's 1587 and the colonists leave Roanoke Island. Why?
They were probably running out of food. They were surrounded by hostile Indians, so they had to move.
Does everyone go to Croatoan Island?
Croatoan Island wouldn't have supported 116 settlers. I think some did go there, and maybe between 15 and 25, but the rest, the main body, headed inland.
Wouldn't they want to stay close to Croatoan Island so they could be found? I mean, why head far inland?
Just before John White left for England, at the end of August 1587, the colonists told him that they were going to head 50 miles into the main. That would bring them directly westwards from Roanoke Island up to the confluence of the Chowan and Roanoke rivers.
We better get going then.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Our trip from Roanoke Island to Bachelor Bay on the western edge of the Albemarle Sound spans just over 50 miles. Jim explains Sir Walter Raleigh's second expedition to Roanoke Island discovered another Indian community, the Chowanokes, during a scouting trip into the interior. These Indians were also willing to support the English settlers, and their location was ideal. It provided interior protection from Spanish naval attack, better land for planting, fresh drinking water, and a partnership with the native people. But Jim also believes that the English had a more personal reason for leaving Roanoke Island: greed.
What would have brought the colonists out this far?
Well, I think the lost colonists had picked up rumors of gold in the interior, and this would have been a perfect base from which to prospect.
Rumors of gold, passed on by members of the previous Roanoke expeditions, turned out to be false. But Jim believes the idea of striking it rich sparked the first American gold rush. If the Roanoke settlers headed west into the interior and joined with native communities, could there be living descendants today? Some experts believe Native Americans, like the Lumbee, absorbed the members of the lost colony into their tribes. I'm reminded of something Dr. David Levere mentioned at the Lumbee powwow. He said that the act of merging diverse cultures was very common among the Indian people.
When we look at European society, we stress the individual. In Indian society, they stress the community. So Indian people would go out of their way to adopt outsiders, bring in strangers, and make them into family.
That actually might explain why some of the people that I'm seeing here at the Lumbee powwow don't look to me like typical Native Americans.
The Indian people are very inclusive. They're married and intermarried, and you get this wonderful Indian community. It looks very different, but they're all Indian.
So it is possible that the colonists would have assimilated, and that's why they disappeared.
I firmly believe that.
Today, elders tell me that over 40 surnames of the original 1587 colonists can be found among the Lumbee people. Could genealogy, rather than archaeology, be the key to unlocking the mystery of the Roanoke colonists? Searching through local North Carolina records, I discovered an interesting article about a 19th century man named Malachi Payne. Payne told his children and grandchildren he was a descendant of a 1587 lost colonist. His name? Henry Payne. Local records place the Payne family name in eastern North Carolina for over 350 years. As part of my search, I've come to Fairway Drive to meet a possible descendant of Henry Payne.
Chris Payne Sr.?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Josh. We spoke on the phone.
Hey, Josh.
Chris Payne has been able to trace his family history to a Thomas Payne Sr., born in the early 1700s.
Start right here. This is actually my dad when he was a little boy.
Roughly 4 generations after Henry Payne arrived in America.
Okay.
He's invited me to his home to take a closer look at his records.
My son did a lot of work in the local records here, and then this is the old family Bible. Mm-hmm. So we tried to match up the work that he found on the family trees over the internet and places like that with what we had in the Bible.
So the people in your family who own this Bible wrote their names in it?
Yes, and passed it down from generation to generation until it finally got to my dad and then to me.
Wow.
My independent researchers confirm Chris's genealogy does date back 300 years. But to tie his bloodline to Henry Payne, I need to use a more scientific approach: DNA.
You've done an impressive job actually tracking your genealogy. I think that this research and the internet as a resource is incredibly powerful, but the only definitive proof would be DNA. And actually, I brought with me a DNA swab kit. And if you're willing, I'd take a sample, and we can use that DNA marker to determine if you're actually related to Henry Payne, who was part of the lost colony.
Oh, that's great.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
On average, the Y chromosome test I'm giving Chris can track his unique DNA up to 750 years through the Payne male line. Not only with his ancestors here in America, but also in Europe. If Chris Payne and a living male descendant of Henry Payne were to possess matching DNA, we could finally prove someone from the lost colony survived. I'm taking Chris's sample with me on the last leg of my journey. England. Here in the United Kingdom, I'll seek a living descendant of the lost colonist Henry Payne and match his DNA to Chris Payne of North Carolina. Teaming up with one of the world's leading genetic experts, we'll attempt to solve this nearly 420-year-old mystery once and for all. I'm investigating one of the oldest mysteries in American history, the lost colony of Roanoke Island. So far, I've explored by water, by air, even by tree, in search of clues that might shed light on their disappearance and possible survival. I've recently discovered that the Roanoke colonists may have assimilated into Indian communities, but no evidence of a living descendant has ever come to light until now. I may have located a possible descendant of the lost colony. I'm heading back to England, where the voyage of Sir Walter Raleigh's 1587 expedition began. With the help of scientists there, I hope to make an historic breakthrough. If the Roanoke colonists survived, then Henry Payne, a member of the third expedition to the island, might have direct descendants in America, some who might even be alive today. Meeting Chris Payne brought me face to face with the possibility he may be one of them. But to prove it, I need to match Chris's DNA sample with the DNA from a known male descendant of Henry Payne in England. Dr. Nick Barrett, one of England's leading genealogists, has been helping me search for Henry's relatives.
Hey there, Josh.
He's asked me to meet him in a small hamlet in Suffolk called Nowton.
This is Nowton? Yeah, welcome to the middle of nowhere. Beautiful part of the country, but I brought you here for a reason.
Yeah.
It turns out that the Payne family that we've been tracking originates in this area, and they can be connected directly with sponsors of colonists and the people that they took across back in the 16th century. Unfortunately, they're very elusive. I've been tracking them down through time, but they seem to either die childless, or the male heirs die out very early, or they all have girls who marry and the surname disappears, which means we can't actually come forward that much.
Because the Y chromosome that we need would only pass through men.
Exactly.
Well, you think after all the troubles looking 100...
Nick has brought me here to the church in Nowton. Between 1540 and 1620, it was owned by the Payne family. Henry Payne himself may have worshipped here over 400 years ago. Although Nick has yet to find evidence of surviving male descendants here in England, I haven't given up the search. I've had Chris Payne's DNA sample sent to Oxford Ancestors, one of the world's top genetic laboratories. And then I went a step further. To improve our odds, I've added DNA samples from 2 other Payne men from eastern North Carolina, both with male lines tracing back 300 years in the Roanoke area. Their names are Michael and Donald. Next, I contacted the Payne Family DNA Project. This independent group has cataloged the DNA results of nearly 100 individuals whose surnames are Payne, not only from the US, but also from the United Kingdom. Their findings were made available to researchers at Oxford Ancestors. I'm meeting their founder and professor of genetics, Dr. Brian Sykes, to review the DNA results. Using 10 key DNA markers, he's compared our 3 North Carolina subjects with those from the Payne Family DNA Project. He uses numeric values to indicate a Y chromosome match or mismatch.
So what do you got for me?
Donald and Chris were exact matches right the way across. These 2, Chris and Donald, are closely related, and Michael isn't.
But it's Michael Payne's DNA signature that proves the most intriguing. When his DNA was compared with a Payne family subject, James Payne from Scotland, the bells went off.
We have now this other man, James, who comes from Scotland. He doesn't match with Chris or Donald, but he does match with Michael. They have a common paternal ancestor who might have been living within the last 500 years or something like that.
The male line of James Payne traces back over 800 years in the United Kingdom. And we know that Michael Payne's dates back 300 years in eastern North Carolina.
How can we relate their common ancestor to the colonization of Roanoke Island?
One of James's ancestors must have gone to America. Then it looks as though the first colonists to the island, if they were related to James, are also related to Michael.
Michael and James link up genetically, and they share a 16th century English ancestor.
Which could have been one of the colonists.
Could have been Henry himself, yes.
This could prove that someone from the lost colony survived.
You've got a good match here. I mean, these are rare chromosomes. It's highly significant. And I can tell you, it doesn't happen every time. So, congratulations on finding the right people.
Sykes, thank you.
A breakthrough in the case.
Pleasure.
With the help of DNA scientists, digging for the truth has made a compelling connection. A genetic link to the past across 2 continents, creating the foundation for future investigations into the lost colony and its survivors. Having suffered through a drought and with limited resources, the Raleigh settlers of 1587 could have merged with Indian tribes and learned the native skills of survival. We've taken an extraordinary leap forward using DNA science to find them. But the search for the Roanoke colonists continues. Perhaps a living descendant will be confirmed in our lifetime.